Welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. My name is Nana Tomova and I'm a storyteller from Sussex. Today I'm going to tell you a couple of tales. For the first 10 years of my life I grew up in Bulgaria and I will tell you my favourite tales from when I was a child. And this first one, which I'm going to tell you, I've never told before. So I'm going to translate it from Bulgarian in my head into English. I hope you enjoy it. Имало едно време. There was once upon a time a woman and a man, and they had a child, a little girl. She was as beautiful as a wild flower growing in the forest. When she had grown up a little, but not too much, her mother grew sick and died. And the father was left caring for the girl by himself. And all his friends and neighbours said, "You must marry again, for a girl must have a mother." And so he took another wife. The stepmother had her own girl, and as soon as she saw this wildflower girl, she hated her and she could not stand her. She used to say to her husband, "Take her out of my sight." But what am I still to do with her? She's so young and she can't look after herself. I don't care. Take her to the forest, drown her in the sea. I don't care. And so one day an argument, the following day an argument, the father couldn't stand it any longer. And so he told his wife to bake a pitka, a round bread. And she did. But she didn't want to use her good flour on this good-for-nothing girl. And so she baked her a bread from white ash from the fireplace. And when it was ready, she gave it to her husband, and her husband put it in a bag over his back, took the girl, and they went walking. They went walking far away, and they reached a hill. And there they climbed on the hill. And the father took out the pitka, rolled it down the hill and said to his daughter, "Tichej, tichej malkoto, tichej da je chvaneš, run to catch it." And the girl started running and reached an old forest with ancient trees, and she ran in the bushes, and finally she took the pitka in her arms. "Tate, father, tate, kde si tate, tate, tatko, tatko?" But her father had left her and gone home. And she got hungry and she broke off the bread and she realised it was made from ash and she couldn't eat. And she walked in the forest all day long looking for a path here, a path there. Tuka patechka, tam patechka. Path was nowhere to be found. And it got dark. The sun began to set behind the ancient woods, and darkness came in the forest. And if you've ever been in the forest in the middle of the night, you will know the forest sounds, the calls of the owls, the calls of the wolves, and the wild boars. Those night sounds can be terrifying. And so she sat on a stump and began to cry out loud. Now in this forest, in a little hut nearby, there lived an old woman. Baba, we'll call her. Grandmother, old woman, Baba. And this old woman heard the girl and she came out. "Koi plače?" Who's crying? "Koi plače tam? Momče ili momiče si? Ako si momiče, ewa tuk. Ako si momče, machaj se." Are you a girl or a boy? If you're a girl, come hither. If you're a boy, go thither. "I'm a girl, Babo." "Come hither then," said the old hag, and she took her to her little house. And there she gave her food. And there she made her a warm, comfortable bed and put her down to sleep. And she went to sleep herself. In the morning, as the sun was rising, the girl got up and she cleaned the house and she tidied everything and she made breakfast for them both. And when the old hag got up, she looked at the house, she looked at the girl, she smiled, but said nothing. Then she announced she was going to go to the forest and pick mushrooms. In the basement, she said to the girl, in the basement, I have creatures, snakes and lizards. Feed them. Boil some bran for them and feed them. But fear not, they won't bite. And she left in the woods. And the girl, she made some bran and she boiled it. And then she waited for it to cool down and she went into the basement. And there were the snakes and the lizards. She saw them and with trepidation she went and she fed them gently, one by one, and she fed them sweetly until they were fed. And then there was still time and the old woman hadn't come back. And so she took little string and little leaves and little shells and little acorns from the forest and tied and decorated each one of their necks with a pretty necklace. Towards midday, the old woman came from the woods and the little creatures went to tell them what had happened. Babo! Babo! Babo, kako ni vrzi grdančete, babo, kako ni vrzi grdančete, gledaj, babo, gledaj. I baba šte vrže na kak grdanče. I baba will decorate the girl's neck, said the old woman. In the early afternoon, she took the girl to a nearby river, a magic river. She laid in the grass and told the girl, I'm going to go to sleep. I'd like you to sing me a song, for I can't sleep very well without being sung to. And this river, while I sleep, you must watch it. It's a magic river. It changes its colour every hour. First, the river will be blue. Then it will be black. Then it will be red. Don't wake me. Then it will be yellow. Then you must wake me. And she went to sleep. And the girl, she sang so quietly and so sweetly. Her song was like the hum of a bee. And as the grandmother slept, the girl looked at the river. Oh, it was blue. Blue like the forget-me-not. Oh, then it was red. Bright red. And then it was black, like the black of a night. And then it was yellow. It was yellow and gold. She'd never seen such a bright river. It shone like the sun. Babo! Babo! Zabudź się! Babo! Zabudź się! cried the girl and shook the grandmother. The grandmother woke up, got the girl, dipped her inside the river and shouted, Fasztaj, babo, kwotu możesz, fasztaj! And the girl listened and she caught the first thing that she could and she brought it, and in her hands she had a little wooden chest. What's in the chest, Babo? Ah, said the grandmother. You must open the chest when you go home. Here is a little key. And then she took the girl into the forest and showed her the way home. And the girl walked home. It was late afternoon when she came. And before she came in the house, everything became bright like the sun shone. Her stepmother looked and became green with envy. Her father asked, What's in the chest? Daughter, what's in the chest? And the daughter took the chest in the house, put her little key inside and opened it. And when she opened the cover, it was gold everywhere. Her stepmother, she couldn't contain her anger. I want my girl to have a chest like this, and I want my girl to brighten the house when she comes in. Bake me a pitka, said the man. And so the stepmother baked her own daughter a pitka. Oh, she took the most magnificent organic flour that she could find, and she baked her a beautiful pitka. And then the father took it and took the girl up to the hill, the same hill, and rolled it down the hill. Tichai cheto, tichai khvani pitka tak khvaniya. And the girl started running down the hill and finally caught the pitka. And she looked for her dad, but her father had long since disappeared and gone home. And then she began to cry as her sister had before. She cried loudly, and out from the hut emerged the old woman. Koi plače? Momče ili momiče si? Ako si momiče, ewa tuka. Ako si momče, hudi si. Momiče sam, babo. I'm a girl, babo. Then come hither. And the woman took the girl into the house and gave her food to eat and made her a bed. And then she herself went to sleep. In the morning, the sun was quite high in the sky when the old hag arose from bed, and she saw the girl still sleeping and snoring loudly. She wasn't pleased. She frowned, but said nothing. She awoke the girl and told her, I'm going for mushrooms. And you clean the house and then feed my creatures, snakes and lizards. But don't worry, I don't bite. And then she went into the forest. The girl started sweeping, but she forgot to sprinkle the stone floor with water, and dust went everywhere and covered everything. And then she boiled the bran, but didn't wait for it to cool down, so she gave it to all the creatures and burned their mouths and tongues. And then the grandmother came back from picking mushrooms, and she saw her whole house gathered in dust. She wasn't pleased. And then the creatures came to her and said, Babo, Babo, kakani ubari, Babo, koku puli, Babo, babuchki, koku puli. And the grandmother said, I baba still bari kakavi, and grandmother will burn the girl. Midday passed. The old woman took the girl to the magic river, sat down on the river bank on the grass, and told her, sing to me, for see, you know I can't sleep without being sung to. And so the girl started singing, but she sang so loudly and so badly that the woman had to say, Spri, I cannot sleep with this song. And so she told her about the colours of the river. First, it will be blue. Don't wake me. Then it will be red. Don't wake me. Then it will be yellow. Don't wake me. When the river becomes black, then you must wake me. And she fell asleep. And the girl watched the river blue and then red. Ha! Like the blood. And then black, like tar. And then she woke the grandmother. Babo! Babo, sabudise! And the grandmother took the girl and dunked her in the river and shouted, Funny babi kvotomoshish, fashte! And the girl took what she could in her hands, and when she emerged in the riverbank, she held a little wooden chest. And the grandmother gave her the key and sent her on the way home. And her mother, the girl's stepmother, waited on the doorstep impatiently. But when the girl came, black clouds appeared and thunder, and it began to rain. And behold, the girl's mother said, "Oh, I can't believe it." She was so angry with the girl. That wooden chest better have gold in it, she said. And then when they opened the wooden chest, from it emerged snakes and lizards and crabs and started chasing everybody and biting everybody, and everybody started shouting and running towards the house. And the stepmother began to chase the girl and said, take her, grab her to the father. And the father chased her outside, and the girl was scared, and she ran and she ran and she ran, exasperated as she saw her father chasing her and grabbing her. And she spread her arms, and as she spread her arms, she flew high into the sky, and higher and higher and higher, until she was higher than the buildings and the trees and the highest mountains. And there, with her bright light, she shone brightly. And there she still is today, the morning star. And you can find her when you look at the sky, and she's still shining down on you until this day. I love this story when I was little. It was my favourite story of all. Absolutely loved it. Next, I want to tell you another story of another character that I grew up with, another Baba, another grandmother. This one you may have heard of. She's called Baba Yaga, and she is the Slavic witch, the witch of Eastern Europe. And all the little children, like myself, are frightened with Baba Yaga when they've been naughty. But when I grew up, I had a lot more respect for Baba Yaga, the wise woman. The woman who guards this world and the next, rooted in nature. The woman of the clouds, the woman of the moon, the woman of the severe winters. She helps people, or she eats people, depending what mood she's in. And so I hope you enjoy the next story. Long, long ago, before the time of your grandmother, and before the time of her grandmother, there lived a Tsar and a Tsaritsa. And they had 3 sons, 3 tall, young, brave, kind sons. You couldn't think them, you couldn't dream them, only in stories you could tell them. And these three sons grew, and then they became the right age for marriage. And so their father, the Tsar, summoned them one day and said, "My sons, it is time for you to marry. And so tomorrow, you must go to the tall building in the city with your bow and arrows. And there you must stand in different directions and pull them tight and release your arrows. And where your arrow lands, it is there that you will find your bride." And so the following morning, they did as the Tsar told them. And the oldest son, he went in the building and he pulled his arrow and he stretched it and he pulled it towards the east. And when he released it, the arrow travelled and landed in the yard of a boyar, a very rich man. And what do you know? It landed just opposite the room of the boyar's daughter, just the right age to be married. And the middle son, he pulled and released his arrow and he travelled west. Travelled and landed just outside the window of a rich merchant. And this merchant had a daughter, and that daughter was sitting by that window. And what do you know? She was just the right age to be married. And the youngest son, his name was Ivan. He pulled his arrow, he pulled it towards the south. When he released it, it travelled and landed in a big, thick black bog. And a frog, Żaba Kekirica, took it. And then the following day, the 3 brothers went to look. And the oldest brother, he found his arrow almost instantly in the yard of a rich boyar. And the daughter agreed to marry him. And the middle son, he found his arrow in the yard of a merchant by the window. And the merchant's daughter agreed to marry him. But Ivan, he travelled for 2 days and 2 nights over forests and over mountains. And finally, on the 3rd day, he found the arrow on top of a rock. On this rock stood a frog, Żaba Kekirica, and the frog held the arrow in his hands. The frog said to Ivan, "Kwa, kwa, Ivane, carski syn, umrzyj się za mnie." "Marry me," she said. But Ivan, he thought, and he said, "But you're a frog. You are not my equal. I cannot marry you. What will people say? They will laugh at me." Kwa, Ivane, carski syne, marry me, and you won't regret it." And Ivan wanted to run away from his luck and his fate, but he decided to marry the frog. Well, the weddings came, and the 3 brothers got married, and the 2 older brothers, they had beautiful feasts with golden goblets and beautiful mead and celebrations and dancing. And Ivan, he had a quiet wedding for nobody to see that he was marrying a frog. And a few days after the wedding, the Tsar summoned his 3 sons and said, "Tomorrow, I would like you, for your wives, to bake me a soft bread. I want to see if they can bake." For these were different times to the times now. And so Ivan went home. He went home with his head lower than his shoulders. And the frog saw him, and she said, "Kwa, kwa, Ivane, carski syne, why are you sad? Have you heard an unkind word from your father?" "How can I not be sad?" said Ivan to his wife the frog. "For my father, the Tsar, has commanded that you bake him a bread." "Ivan, son of the Tsar," said the frog, "do not worry. Go to sleep, for the morning is wiser than the evening." And so Ivan went to bed, and the frog, she took off her skin and she peeled it back, and there stood a beautiful young maiden, Vasilisa the Wise, Vasilisa Primrodna. And she went on the balcony and she shouted, "Майки и бавачки, съберете се и пригответе се да направите хляб, такъв хляб, какъвто съм яла, като бях при моя бащи дом." And she shouted to the mothers and the maids to come forth and get ready to bake such a bread like the one she ate in her father's home. In the morning, when Ivan awoke, the frog had had the bread ready for a long time ago. He went and saw the bread, and such a bread! So magical it was, you couldn't think it. You couldn't dream it, only in a tale you could tell it. It was baked golden to perfection, and it had that beautiful smell, that beautiful smell of freshly baked bread. And it was smooth at the top, and on top of the bread were castles, big castles, and on top of the castles were birds flying, and around the castles were wild beasts running. The frog put the bread on a golden tray and gave it to Ivan to take to the Tsar. Ivan and his brothers took the breads that their wives had baked to their father the Tsar, and he judged them. First, he took the bread of his oldest son, the one that married a boyar's daughter, and it was burnt and it was blackened with ash and it smelled disgusting. And he said, this bread one can only eat if they're very, very hungry. And he tried the bread of his middle son, the one that was baked by the merchant's daughter. And it was underbaked and crooked. And he said, this bread only dogs can eat. And then he tried the bread baked by Ivan's wife, the frog. And he said, this bread must only be eaten on feast days and celebrations. And then he told them, tomorrow, I'd like your daughters to weave a silken carpet in one night. I want to know how good they are at weaving. And so Ivan went home with a stooped head lower than his shoulders. And his wife, the frog, saw him and said to him, Ivan, son of the Tsar, Kva, kva, Ivan, Tsarski syne. Why are you so sad? Have you heard an angry word from your father? How can I not be sad? For my father, the Tsar, has commanded that you weave him a silken carpet in one night. Ivan, son of a Tsar, do not worry. Go to bed, go to sleep, for the morning is wiser than the evening. And Ivan went to sleep, and the frog took off and peeled her frog skin, and she became again Vasilisa Premradna, Vasilisa the Wise. And she went out of the balcony, and she shouted in all directions, Майки бавачки, елате пригответе да направите килим, такъв килим, каквато съм стояла, като бях при баща ми. Mothers and maidens, come and gather forth and get ready to make a rug, such a rug as the one that I stood on when I lived in my father's house. In the morning, when Ivan awoke, the frog had had the beautiful rug weaved. And he saw it. It was magnificent. Such a beautiful rug he had never seen. And I tell you, it was so beautiful that you couldn't think it. You couldn't dream it. Only in tales you could tell it. It was woven with golden and silver thread. And it was decorated with the most beautiful embroidery of birds and blooming flowers. And the frog gave the silken carpet to Ivan to take to his father, the Tsar. And there the Tsar waited to see the carpets. And his oldest son, the carpet made by the boyar's daughter, the king looked at the carpet and said, This carpet is only good to be used as a horse's coat. And then he looked at the beautiful rug, a silk rug done by the middle son's daughter, by the middle son's wife. He looked at it and he said, This carpet is only good to be used to wipe somebody's feet. And then he looked at Ivan's wife's carpet, the one the frog had weaved, and he said, This carpet, this carpet, I will put in my room and I will take it out only in celebrations. And then he commanded again, Tomorrow, come and invite your wives. I will put on a gathering, a feast. I will have meals made for them, and they will eat as they dance for me and entertain me. For these were different times. I want to see if your wives can dance. And again, Ivan went home with his head low and his shoulders stooped. And his wife saw him and said, Kva, Ivane Tsarski syne, why are you so sad? Have you heard a bad word from your father, the Tsar? said Ivan. How can I not be sad? For the Tsar, my father, has commanded that you come to the palace so you can dance for him. Ivane, Tsarsky syne, go to sleep, for the morning is wiser than the evening. And then Ivan went to sleep. And in the morning when he awoke, the frog was waiting for him. And she told him, go to the festivities by yourself. I will join you later on. And when you hear a loud banging and a loud thunder, do not be alarmed, but tell everybody, do not worry. This is my froggy, and she comes in a barrel. And so it was evening, and Ivan went to the festivities in his father's palace. And there he met his brothers, and they were with their wives. And they had brushed their hair, and they put beautiful clothes, and they had decorated their faces, and they looked magnificent. And his brothers, they said to him, well, Ivane, where's your wife? What, you couldn't bring her a little handkerchief? And where did you find such a beauty? You must have walked all the bogs. And then all the guests went to sit down on the tables. And a loud noise came. Everything started shaking. The windows started shaking. It was thunder and everybody started panicking. But Ivan said to everybody, do not worry. For this is my wife, the froggy, my little froggy, and she comes in a barrel. And they all went to the windows to have a look at what was happening. And there was a beautiful carriage with 6 beautiful white horses. And the carriage stopped. And out of the carriage came a young girl, a woman. She was magnificent. When she came out of the carriage, it was so bright, it was like the sun shone. It was Vasilisa Premradna, Vasilisa the Wise. And she took her husband's wife Ivan, and she led him through the oak tables laden with beautiful tablecloths. And they sat down to eat. And they ate and they drank. And when she finished drinking the last few droplets, she hid in her left sleeve. And when she finished eating, she hid the little bones of the roasted meat inside her right sleeve. And the other wives of the older sons looked at this, thought, what is this? What is this magic? And they did the same. And then Vasilisa the Wise took her husband's hand and led him to the dance floor, and then she danced gracefully. And when she waved her left hand, a lake appeared. And when she waved her right hand, swans appeared and began gliding on the lake. Everybody's mouths dropped. They had never seen such a thing. And when she stopped dancing, everything disappeared. The lakes and the swans, like nothing had happened. Well, the other princesses, they did the same. They went to dance on the dance floor with their husbands. And they waved with the left hand, and they sprinkled the guests with wine, and they waved with the right hand, and the bones went straight into the eyes of the king and of the Tsar, and he was so angry he banished them from his palace. And during the night's festivities, Ivan secretly escaped and went into his house. He searched high and low and searched high and low, and finally found the frog skin. He threw it in the fireplace and watched it burn. When the festivities were finished, Ivan and Vasilisa the Wise went home, and she searched for her skin. She searched and searched and searched, but couldn't find it. Ivane, Tsarski syne, какво си сторил, какво си направил? She cried, what have you done? What have you done? I must go to the palace of my father, Koshchei the Deathless. It is there that you will find me." And then she turned into a swan and flew out of the window. And Ivan, he put his arms on top of his face and he cried bitter tears. He cried and he cried, and then he turned his head towards the heavens and prayed to the heavens in all four directions, and left and walked wherever his eyes took him. And he had been walking a long time or a short time, he didn't quite know, and ahead he saw an old man. And this old man said, "Youngster, good day, where are you off to?" And Ivan told the old man what he had done. "Ah, Ivane Tsarsky Sine, why did you have to burn the skin? You weren't the one to wear it. It was none of your business to be the one to burn it. Now Vasilisa resides in the house of father, Koshchei the Deathless. But I tell you what, take this bowl of string and roll it on the ground, and wherever it rolls you must follow it bravely. Good luck to you," said the old man. He gave the string to Ivan. Ivan rolled it and started walking. He walked and he walked through ancient dark woodlands and tall treacherous mountains, and he walked through thick black bogs. He walked for a long time or he walked for a short time, he couldn't tell you. He was tired. And in one of the ancient woodlands in front of him he saw a big bear, and he went and he took his bow and arrow, went to pull it taut, but before he could release the arrow, the bear spoke in a human language. "Ivane, Tsarsky Sine, Ivan, son of the Tsar, take pity on me. Do not kill me. I'll become useful to you one day." And Ivan took pity on the bear and he carried on. And he walked following this bowl of string. And he walked in one of the green fields. He saw a hare, and again he went to kill the hare, but the hare spoke in a human voice. "Ivane, Tsarsky Sine, do not kill me. Take pity on me, for I will be useful to you one day." And Ivan once again took pity on the hare. And then he walked and he heard a great sound, and he looked at the sky, and there was a duck flying, and again he went to kill the duck, but the duck spoke. "Ivane, Tsarsky Sine, do not kill me. Take pity on me. I'll become useful to you one day." And again Ivan took pity on the duck. And then he walked. By this time he had been walking a very long time. He was parched and hungry and exhausted, and every limb in his body hurt. And the ball of thread, well, it took him near the deep blue sea. And there on the sand he saw a pike flapping near death. And he said, "This pike I'm finally going to eat. I'm starving." But this pike, it spoke to him in a human voice. "Ivane, Tsarsky Sine, take pity on me. Throw me in the sea." And Ivan, well, he took pity on the pike and threw the pike in the deep blue sea. And then he carried on following that ball of string until he reached an ancient woodland. And in that woodland he saw a little wooden hut. It was a strange hut. It stood on 2 chicken legs, and it was spinning. It was spinning round and round. Well, you know whose hut that is, don't you? And Ivan looked at the hut, and he spoke to the hut and said, little hut, turn around with your back towards the forest and your face facing me." And the little hut turned around until it had its door facing Ivan. And Ivan opened the door and stepped inside. And inside, on top of the stove on the 9th shelf, was Baba Yaga, lying down, sharpening her sharp yellow teeth with a metal file. Her long breasts were resting on metal hooks, and her nose was so long it reached the ceiling. Ivane, carski syne, to show si tuka sam ili drug причина. Ivan, son of the Tsar, have you come here out of your own will or out of woe? Asked Baba Yaga. Ah, Baba Yaga, replied Ivan. First, give me food, give me water, put me in a bathhouse, and then you can ask me questions. And so Baba Yaga, she fed him, she watered him, she steamed him in a bath, and then Ivan told him what had happened. I know, said Baba Yaga. Vasilisa Premradna is with her father, Koshchei the Deathless. Now, Koshchei the Deathless, Koshchei Besmrtny, he is a villain which lives between the two worlds, between the living and the dead world. And his skin is translucent, so you can see his bones underneath. She lives with Koshchei the Deathless, said Baba Yaga. His kingdom is beyond 9 lands and beyond 9 seas into the 10th. And there you will find his palace. But he is Koshchei the Deathless, and he is not feared by anybody. He cannot be killed with an arrow. He cannot be killed with a dagger. Where hides his death? Asked Ivan. His death hides at the tip of a needle. That needle is inside an egg. That egg is inside a duck. That duck is inside a hare. That hare is inside a wooden chest. That wooden chest is atop of an oak tree. That oak tree is inside a wooden ancient forest. And Koshchei the Deathless guards it with an apple of his eye, and therefore he fears no one. Baba Yaga, generous as she was that day, showed Ivan the path to go. And the following morning, fed and watered, Ivan walked and walked until he reached that ancient woodland. In that woodland he saw a huge oak tree. The top was going beyond the clouds. Its highest branches were covering the sun, and its roots were deep, deep underground. And just on top of that ancient oak, he could just about see that wooden box, wooden chest. And he thought to himself, where is that bear when you need it? And no sooner had he thought it, a bear appeared out of nowhere and started climbing the tree and shaking the tree, and the box fell down and shattered into 1,000 pieces. And from the box started running a rabbit, a hare. It ran and ran and ran, and there came Ivan's rabbit, and it hit the rabbit and tore the rabbit into 1,000 pieces. And out of the rabbit started running a duck flying and flying and flying, and Ivan's duck started flying against it and hit the duck, and out of the duck flew an egg and landed inside the sea. Ivan looked at what happened and he started to cry, but as he was crying he saw a pike emerge from the waters, and it had the egg inside its mouth. And Ivan took the egg, broke the egg, took the needle, broke the tip of the needle, and Koshchei the Deathless died, formed ashes and dust. And Ivan went into Koshchei Palace, and there he saw Vasilisa the Wise. She was waiting for him at the gate. Ah, Ivane, carski syne, she welcomed him. And Ivan went and took a steed the fastest steed, and him and Vasilisa the wise ran home on the steed until they reached the kingdom. And there were big celebrations. And there was another wedding. And such a feast there was. And they began their life as a couple, as a married couple. Vasilisa, no longer the same person. Ivan, no longer the same person after his initiation and journey. They were ready to be married and to begin that next phase of marriage. And I tell you, the celebrations were wonderful, such dancing and such merriment. And if you go there, there is still a little mead in a golden goblet waiting for you. Thank you.
Did you enjoy that storyteller? Of course you did. And if you enjoyed it, like the minstrels of old, we're passing round the hat. And if you have some, whether it's paper or coin, our storytellers would appreciate what you put in. Every penny you put in goes directly to that storyteller through paper. All you have to do is go to worldstorytellingcafe.com. Click on today's stories or click on that storyteller and there'll be a hat below the story. And you can just drop a little in that hat. Well, thank you for listening. And if you can afford it, we'd appreciate it.